Welcome in for our final tier list of the regular season, our final tier list that is going to encapsulate every team in the NFL. Next week, I will be tier ranking exclusively the playoff teams. So this video may be a little bit longer just because I am going to be talking about where I think teams' direction should be going into the offseason. So let's just hop right into it. Week 18 NFL tier list. As always, we start with the 2025 mock draft season tier, and even though the Dolphins are eligible for the playoffs, I still have them in this tier at this point. I think even if by some miracle Carson Wentz beat the Broncos and they got into the playoffs, they are a clear-cut one and done. I don't even know if Tua would be ready to play. And honestly, this offseason, if I was the Dolphins, I'd look to trade Tyreek Hill. I just think the overall roster needs to get better. Tyreek is kind of at the edge of that decline, and like Bill Belichick used to do, trading players a year before they drop off completely is the move. That's what I would do if I was the Dolphins. The Indianapolis Colts, disgraceful loss to the New York Giants, letting that defense put up 45. The defensive coordinator's got to be fired. And honestly, I'd put a lot of stock in investing in that defense this offseason. You know, another offseason of Anthony Richardson and Shane Steichen, Jonathan Taylor, Pittman, Downs, Alec Pierce, maybe go get a tight end. But other than that, I think the offense is fine. The Colts really got to work on that defense and then just having Anthony Richardson mature as a player. The New York Jets, honestly, where their draft pick is, they might be better off keeping Aaron Rodgers. But if it's going to make Garrett Wilson unhappy and request a trade, I'd move off of him. And, you know, if you're not going to be able to draft a quarterback, Kirk Cousins, a guy like that, or maybe do a Kirk and like Jalen Milroe later in the draft combination, something there for the Jets. But, you know, I don't think that they're going to be in a spot where they're getting Shador or Cam Ward. It's a weaker quarterback class. So if they wanted to just draft talent and wait until next year, you know, they have like the number 7 pick in the draft, can try and get a second or third round quarterback and get one of those really premier edge rushers. I'm all for that if I am the Jets. The Raiders, who kind of have won their way out of a top tier draft pick, they maybe are going to be a team to bring in Aaron Rodgers. I kind of think this offseason it's okay to do the 1-year quarterback thing just because next year's draft class at quarterback does feel a lot better than this year's. This year's feels like a 2-guy class. And even at that, I'm a little shaky on Shador, if I'm being honest with you guys. So, you know, the Raiders this offseason, bring in a new head coach, get a real good culture going. Get some offensive skill pieces. You know, you have Bowers, that's great, but you have no run game. Jacoby Myers is a really good 2, probably not a 1, and just build a foundation for when you are ready for a quarterback. The Cleveland Browns, listen, they're kind of working their way into now getting a quarterback. In Cam Ward in Cleveland, I think that would be a home run for this team. Remember, the Browns made the playoffs last year. They have a former coach of the year, a good defense. Jerry Jeudy's looking promising. Nick Chubb could be back. You know, you could make some moves around the margins, but this team really might actually just be a quarterback away from being a true playoff team year after year. Hell, they made it last year with Joe Flacco off the couch. The Jacksonville Jaguars, they're pick 5 right now. We'll see where they end up, but they got to fix that defense. Trevor, they got to bring in an offensive-minded coach for him. If they could bring in Ben Johnson, that would be huge. And they have weapons. Brian Thomas looks great. Etienne and Bigsby's a fine backfield. Evan Ingram, Christian Kirk coming back. So they really got to work on that defense. Abdul Carter, Mason Graham. Those are guys that I'm looking at for the Jaguars. The Tennessee Titans, they might be getting Shador now. If I was them, I would take Cam Ward. He is my quarterback 1 in the class now. A little bit more evaluating to do as the offseason goes, but that's kind of where I'm at right now. They have kind of fallen into a spot, though, where they will get a quarterback. It looks like they have the number 2 pick. So even if they don't trade up to 1, they could say, hey, we're fine with Shador or Cam Ward. And that's really, really good for them because I like their defense and I like some of their offensive pieces. Similar to the Browns, I do feel like the Titans are just a quarterback away from competing for a playoff spot, especially in that AFC South. The New England Patriots, they now have the number 1 pick in the draft. And if it's me, I'm taking Travis Hunter. I don't know if he's going to be able to play both sides of the ball in the pros, but I'll tell you what, he's going to be a lockdown corner. And even if it's just certain packages where Travis plays wide receiver, you are getting a dual threat player at the NFL level, a premier talent. You know, this is a home run, can't miss pick if I'm the Patriots. Maybe if the offer is sweet enough to trade down, I consider it, but we got our quarterback of the future in Drake May. Let's get a star defensive player. The Seattle Seahawks, they're done. There's some weird wonky scenario I still think where they could get into the playoffs potentially. No, they're completely out. They're completely out. So they're done. I still think that they need to upgrade from Geno Smith, but I don't see it happening. Mike McDonald going into year 2 will get the defense even more right. A lot of young guys stepped up this year. And if you could just get Geno to consistently show some of his good to great traits, they could be a real threat to go win the NFC West next year. They were a threat to win it this year, but you need more consistency out of Geno. The Dallas Cowboys, I think they're just going to run it back and try and draft talent. And Jerry's been pretty decent at that. They're going to pay Micah. They've paid CD. They paid Dak. I think that with what Mike McCarthy did at the end of this year, they're probably looking at themselves like, hey, we were second in the NFC last year and blew that playoff game. And this year, if we were healthy, we're a playoff team. Like, let's run it back. And maybe next year's our year, I guess, is like their thought process. The Arizona Cardinals, I've heard some chatter about this team moving on from Kyler Murray, and maybe if the package is right, but this team wasn't expected to be a 7-8 win team, and that's where they're going to finish. They were expected to be like a 4-win team, so they may have doubled their win projection this year. Kyler has to start taking his job more seriously, I think, because now the pieces are around him with McBride, Harrison, Benson, and James Conner, and the defense is certainly stepping up. But I think I'd give this current core another year just because they kind of overachieved this year, and then maybe get to reevaluating next offseason. But as of right now, I definitely just run it back. The 49ers, the Brock Purdy thing. Do you pay him? Do you not pay him? I'm firmly on the side of you don't pay him this offseason. Listen, if he's willing to take like a Baker Mayfield 3 for $100 deal, or even since he's younger, you want to do like a longer version of that, like 5 for $170, 5 for $180. I guess like I would flirt with that idea, but after this offseason, watching the Jags and the Dolphins pay their guys that they weren't completely sold on $55 million a year, and just how regrettable that is. If I'm the Niners, there's not a shot in hell I do it, especially when I do have a Kyle Shanahan who has proven that he can go out there and win with subpar quarterback play. That's just my thought on it. The New Orleans Saints, they're kind of cooked, if I'm being honest. They're in cap hell from some of the things that they did during the Drew Brees era to try and win. And they've kind of refused to take their medicine. They've kind of kept kicking the can down the road. Personally, if I was them, I'd punt on next season and really just eat all that money and try and get the number 1 pick to get one of the quarterbacks from next draft class, because Derek Carr, Spencer Rattler, both not it. The New York Giants may have played themselves out of a quarterback, which maybe isn't the worst thing in the world, because again, the 2026 quarterback draft class is better than the 2025 quarterback draft class. Maybe they weren't sold on Shador or Cam Ward, and they're like, let's draft talent, build up a better foundation. I do think the Giants have a good core. I'd keep Daboll. Malik Neighbors as a star. The Carolina Panthers, man, keep track. Dave Canales was the right hire. Bryce Young has started to look really, really promising, and just keep surrounding him with talent. I'd be in on big name free agent wide receiver like T. Higgins, and just really try and give Bryce Young the best possible scenario to succeed next year. Because if we learned anything this year, it's that the NFC South is pretty open. Things could change on a dime, and the Panthers could be competing for this division next year. And the Chicago Bears, listen, over the last couple weeks, Caleb Williams like 20 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. He's been playing great. He showed flashes. You got to get more of an offensive mind in there, whether it's kind of what the Commanders did and brought in Kingsbury as offensive coordinator, or you go get Ben Johnson. He's reportedly interested in the job. You have Caleb, you have Swift, you have DJ Moore, Rome Odunze, Keenan Allen, Cole Kmet, Gerald Everett. Like, you don't need no more weapons. Build up that offensive line, build up that defense, and come with a full 53-man roster of guys ready and willing to compete, a good culture, and I think the Bears can make some noise next year. In the Frisky tier, I have the Cincinnati Bengals, man. Technically, they're still alive, but it's like they need, X, Y, and Z to happen. They need the Chiefs with Carson Wentz to beat the Broncos, and they need the Dolphins to lose to the Jets and themselves to beat the Pittsburgh Steelers. That game is Saturday night, so they'll be out there, they'll be trying, they'll be balling. Hell of a season from Joe Burrow, hell of a season from Jamar Chase. You're probably going to lose T. Higgins. If they are to miss the playoffs, I do think they should consider firing Zach Taylor. And it's not because he's just done a terrible, terrible job this year, but when you start looking around that division, Harbaugh, Tomlin, Stefanski, he's the worst head coach. They consistently get off to slow starts. That to me points to a culture thing. If they had won versus the Patriots earlier this year, or they could have defended the Ravens and won one of those games, like they would have been in the playoffs. Instead, they're probably headed towards a miss. It would take a miracle. They're frisky, and if they get in, it's kind of like a real shit situation. If you're Buffalo, it's like, hey, congrats on being so great this year. You get to play Joe Burrow in round one of the playoffs, but the Bengals did their thing. The Falcons, technically, they're still alive. They need the Buccaneers to lose to the Panthers and them to beat the Saints, or flip-flop that. The Buccaneers lose to the Saints, them beat the Panthers. I think next year you just kind of focus on Penix and getting a full year with him. Obviously, Kirk Cousins wasn't the answer, and that was a bad spending of money. You would have been way better off spending that money on the defensive side of the ball, but you're going to eat your medicine next year. You're going to cut them, and you're going to progress forward. The fringe playoff teams, the Denver Broncos, they are right there. They are one win against Carson Wentz from getting to the playoffs, and, if they do, you have to just really consider the year as a whole a massive W for the Broncos. They're like over-under win total was set at 4.5, 5.5, depending on where you got it. The team's going to reach, double-digit wins. They're going to be a playoff team. Bo Nix in his first year with Sean Payton proves a lot of the doubters, including myself, wrong. I didn't think that Bo Nix would be this successful, especially not this quick, but, he came in with limited weapons. This is probably going to be the worst weapons core he has. Cortland Sutton, Marvin Mims, Javonte Williams. My guess is they get you an upgrade somewhere, whether that's trading for a tight end in David Njoku, which was rumored around the deadline, and I still think would be a great move for this team. Or maybe they're in on T. Higgins, and then you have two really big body wide receivers in him and Cortland Sutton for Bo Nix to throw that ball up to. The defense is excellent. They lead the NFL in sacks. They have the best corner in football, so the Broncos have a really, really good core, whether they do or don't make it, but I do think that they're going to be in the playoffs, as well as Tampa Bay. I think Tampa Bay is really, really solid. I think healthy, they are potentially a Super Bowl contender, depending on where that defense could get to, but with Mike Evans and McMillan playing really well, Baker Mayfield's been balling out. The offense has just had such high highs over the last month, especially against the Chargers and last week versus the Panthers. Baker has proved everybody wrong. He is worth that money. This guy has been resurrected his career in Tampa. Going to the Buccaneers saved Baker Mayfield's career, and now they're looking to go back-to-back with Baker and win this division again. The playoff teams tier, and of course, the Houston Texans are still in this tier. They have lived this tier. They have owned this tier. This has been their tier. And the Texans, they have a bright future going forward. I think that they could be a threat to win a playoff game this year, depending on who they face. Right now, it's scheduled to be them in Pittsburgh, and I do think with the quarterback play of CJ Stroud and a real pass rush in Houston, that they could win that game. Stingley's a top 5 corner in football. Daniil Hunter and Will Anderson Jr., that's a top 5 edge rush duo in football. You have a good head coach. Stroud is a good quarterback, going through some sophomore slumps, but you got to remember, Nico Collins was out a lot of this year. Tank Dell's now been out. He's been dealing with a lot of injuries to his receiving core, and that core didn't really play a lot of games together. So I think the Texans will probably have to address wide receiver this offseason, because I don't see Tank Dell playing next year. Diggs was on a 1-year deal. Garrett Wilson, it's rumored that if he gets traded, it could be to Houston, reunite with CJ Stroud. That would absolutely be epic, but this team 100% needs to focus on offensive line this offseason. I've said it once, I'll say it 1,000 times. The Pittsburgh Steelers, man, they're a playoff team, and I don't think the defense, especially the secondary, is strong enough for them to go on a Super Bowl run. But, all things considered, the Steelers once again outperformed expectations this season. Tomlin and Russell Wilson, when they brought Russ in, a lot of people questioned it. It was for sure the right move. The deep ball, the connection to George Pickens. George Pickens has looked excellent. Russell Wilson this version of Russell Wilson might be the best quarterback that George Pickens has ever played with. The talent is very clearly there. Now, he's got that Georgia attitude to him, but the talent's very clearly there. Pittsburgh, just a really good organization overall. They're always competing. The Chargers, man, I thought it was a possibility that this team could be a playoff team this year, but I didn't think that it would be this good. I thought that they would be in a situation that the Broncos are in, but the Chargers are a lock playoff team. They just hung 40 on the Patriots. Justin Herbert has really kind of said, hey, I'm for sure in those top 5 conversations. Now, however you want to mix it around, I understand, but he's definitively locked into being a top 8 quarterback for sure for me, and he is in those top 5 conversations. This team, when Dobbins is healthy, has a real run game. Ladd McConkey, an absolute steal. The guy should be in contention for Rookie of the Year. He's not going to win it because Jaden Daniels is, but we should have conversations about McConkey on the ballot for sure. Harbaugh, Minter, they come in and they just flip the culture immediately. The team runs the ball, the team plays good defense. It's amazing what a coaching staff can really do. Brandon Staley had this team as an absolute joke, laughing stock of the league. Jim Harbaugh comes in, and now we're talking about, can the Chargers win the Super Bowl next season? I think the answer to that is they certainly could. Now, Washington, the Commanders, they're a playoff team. I don't think they fully have the pieces to consistently go on a Super Bowl level run this year. But again, similar to what I just said about the Chargers, the fact that we are here in Washington as an 11-win team potentially going into the playoffs, that is just very impressive. Jaden Daniels, I think he's a top 10 quarterback in the league, truthfully. The way he plays the game, it's very point guard-esque. It feels like he has his pulse on the action at all times, and the game is just very slow for him. I love the way that he plays. Him with Terry McLaurin wasn't anything crazy this past week with AJ Terrell on McLaurin, and this guy still found a way to go win that game. With the running backs that they have there, Alamani Zacchaeus is his other weapon. Like, they're going to get Jaden some more help on that offensive side of the ball, and you better watch out. If you are the Eagles, it feels like this is the year where it's like, hey, the Commanders aren't at full strength, the Cowboys got hurt, and the Giants are they suck. Like, this has to be the Eagles' year, and for the Commanders fans, it's like, hey, this is better than we thought we would be. Let's go have fun in the playoffs. That's pretty much where I'm at with them. Now, I had a really hard time differentiating the Super Bowl contenders tier from the Super Bowl favorites tier, just because the teams that I have in the Super Bowl favorites tier, I'm so locked in on really believing that those are the teams that are going to be competing for a Super Bowl. But the teams that I have in this contenders tier, I am giving a puncher's chance to, for various reasons. We'll talk about it, but I just want to let you guys know, to me, there's a real gap between favorites and contenders. I think the contenders are a lot closer to the playoff teams than I do the Super Bowl favorites teams. Just want to get that out there. The Detroit Lions, listen, that offense is going to have to put up 35 plus a game, each and every playoff game, for them to be able to advance. And I'm not saying that they couldn't do it. I'm giving them a puncher's chance, right? Goff, Gibbs, Montgomery could be back, Amon-Ra, Laporta, Jamison Williams, Ben Johnson calling the plays. That offense is lethal, and they certainly have the ability to go anywhere and run up the score on you. They just put 40 on the Niners last night, but they needed to put 40 on the Niners to win last night. My problem is their defense. It's just not good at this point. The injuries have caught up to them, and I don't know if they could stop a nosebleed. And going into the playoffs, you're going to be playing really good teams. Right now, if they lose to Minnesota, your path ends up becoming Tampa, who's already beat you, and Baker, who's playing really good football. And then you would play Minnesota on the road, and then you're looking at Philly, or even if it's, Green Bay or the Rams, these teams have good quarterbacks. Like, you're going to be facing good teams. And then if you made it to the Super Bowl, you're looking at Mahomes, Allen, or Lamar potentially. It's like, I just don't think that defense can hold up for a playoff run. The Green Bay Packers, man, people aren't going to like this. I just don't really have confidence in them to make the run this year. This year, they are 11-5 or 11-5. They have 5 losses. Their 5 losses are to the Vikings, 0-2, to the Lions, 0-2, and to the Eagles, 0-1. The 3 other best teams in their conference, they are winless against them this year. That is my problem with the Green Bay Packers. When they have faced playoff teams, they're 2-5 as a whole this year. So against the good competition, Green Bay has struggled. Well, in the playoffs, it's nothing but good competition. Could they win a playoff game or 2? Yeah, I think they could be in the NFC Championship. But I just don't have the faith in Green Bay like I do the Super Bowl favorites to actually believe that this team is ready to go on a Super Bowl run. And lastly here, the Super Bowl contenders tier, the Rams. You have Stafford, you have McVay, you have Puka, Kyron. Can Cooper Kupp produce for you in a playoff run? That's going to be huge for the Rams and what their ceiling is. Because over the last month, Cooper Kupp has looked washed. If he can perform at the level he just was earlier this season, they have a decent puncher's chance. Right now, I'm just kind of barely giving them a shot because I do think there is like a greater than 0% shot that they go on a run. But, I almost put this team in the playoff teams tier, if I'm being completely honest. The Rams are one that I'm just real shaky on because I don't fully believe in their secondary. Their offense feels a little Puka dependent, but when you have Stafford, you have McVay, you have weapons, and you have a real pass rush in Verse and Fisk, I'm going to give you the punter's chance. And then we get to the Super Bowl favorites tier, and each one of these teams I think could win the title. Obviously, when it comes to Kansas City, back-to-back champs, 15-1, taking the week off. The defense is strong. They have the best player in the world in Patrick Mahomes. They have the best coach in football in Andy Reid. You could argue when it comes to playoff time, they have the best defensive coordinator in Spags. Travis Kelce has been producing, been getting going. Hollywood Brown back for this team is great. Hopkins is out there. They found a way to get Worthy going. The run game with Pacheco and Hunt has been pretty solid. The offensive line is good. Like, everything about the Chiefs has started to click at the right time. And it's a scary sight for the rest of the league. You know, if they had Rashee Rice, that would have been crazy. At the beginning of the year, for my OGs from the old channel, no, I predicted that the Chiefs would go 17-0. With all the injuries they had to Pacheco, to Rashee Rice, to Hollywood Brown, to not having Hopkins most of the year, to Travis Kelce really taking a step back, they went 15-1. There's a reason this team is back-to-back champs. There's a reason that the AFC playoffs are going through their home field. They are a ridiculously good team. But Buffalo beat Kansas City this year. The one loss the Chiefs have was to the Buffalo Bills this season. So the Bills are obviously strong. Josh Allen is having an MVP type season. Buffalo, of all the teams in the AFC, I think is the deepest when it comes to weapons. Amari Cooper, Keon Coleman, Khalil Shakur, Dalton Kincaid, Dawson Knox, James Cook, Ty Johnson, Ray Davis. All of these guys have produced. Josh Allen on the ground, Josh Allen through the air. They have it all lined up for them this year. The defense has been playing strong. Von Miller on third downs has been excellent. The pass rush, just in general, has been really good. Teron Johnson's one of the best nickel corners in football. A lot of things are good for Buffalo right now. This feels like their best season, but they do have to go to Arrowhead. At some point, they're going to have to play Kansas City. They know that. We know that. They're also probably going to have to play Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens, who beat the Bills earlier this year. That 3 AFC team, the Chiefs beat the Ravens beat the Bills, and the Bills beat the Chiefs. You got that circle of wins there. This offense has been one of the greatest of all time in terms of efficiency. Lamar Jackson has a case to win his 3rd MVP. Derrick Henry would be right up there for Offensive Player of the Year if Saquon Barkley didn't have one of the greatest running back seasons of all time. You have Zay Flowers, who's been really good. Mark Andrews has been a pretty consistent touchdown. Isaiah Likely with those 2 tight end sets. Bateman has been a deep threat. The offensive line has been decent. The defense has really started to come along. We all knew all season that the offense was good, but this defense has finally started to show up. The pass rush is starting to develop. Matabuke is a really good player. Roquan Smith, Marlon Humphrey could be in Defensive Player of the Year conversations. You have Kyle Hamilton. There's stars on this defense, but the defense as a whole has started to play championship level defense. They're not a top 5 unit, but the offense is. The defense for the Ravens has been good enough that I do think they can compete for a Super Bowl. The Philadelphia Eagles. Listen, the Eagles have all the pieces. Top to bottom, it might be the best roster in football. Jalen Hurts will be healthy, and we've seen just over the last couple of weeks certain limitations that their offense has without him. Saquon Barkley, the 9th running back ever to rush for 2,000 yards. A historic season, and if they let him go versus the Giants, he'll probably break the record. A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, for my money, it's, the best wide receiver duo in football, but we could have that conversation another day for sure. Dallas Goedert, he's going to be back for the team for the playoffs. The offensive line, top 3 in football. The defense, in terms of yards allowed, top 5. They're finally starting to force turnovers. The last 2 weeks, they forced 9 turnovers, and one of those games was against Jaden Daniels. So, they're playing some real competition. The Eagles' defense is really spiking it up at this point. The offense has been solid. So, the Eagles, it feels like it could be their year. And the Minnesota Vikings. Last week, I had them in the Contenders tier. And a lot of people gave me some pushback, and I said, I just want to see them do what they've been doing again against a high-level team in Green Bay. And they dominated a lot of that game. The box score looked a lot closer than it was, because for 3 quarters, Minnesota felt like they were dominating that football game. Sam Darnold has been absolutely excellent this year. At minimum, they need to franchise tag him and bring him back. The weapons, Jefferson, Addison, Hawkinson, Aaron Jones, have been producing. The offensive line has been excellent. That defense and Brian Flores really gets after other teams and really makes the opposing quarterback uncomfortable. I can't believe that I'm saying this as we head into week 18, because as we headed into week 1, I would have never thought I was saying this, but Minnesota is one of 2 teams in the NFC that I really believe this could be their year. And, you know, there's always a surprise team in the NFL that's surprisingly good, but usually it's like the Broncos and the Commanders, and wow, they're surprisingly a playoff team. It was the Texans last year. The Vikings have shocked me and shocked a lot of people, and I can't believe it, but they are legit Super Bowl favorites. Them and the Eagles in the NFC Championship feels like where we're headed. But as always, these are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comment section down below. If you're new to the channel and you're not subscribed and you love the NFL, hit that button. I will be up here tomorrow to talk about the MVP race. We're going to talk about a lot of playoff coverage, and we're going to get to ramping up. And then I got a lot of off-season mock drafts, you know, end of season quarterback rankings, end of season team grades. Like, we're going throughout the off season too. I appreciate you guys' support. I'll catch you next time. Peace.